Chapter 58 H. Noirtier de Villefort. We will now relate what was passing in the house of the Procureur after the departure of Madame Danglars and her daughter, and during the time of the conversation between Maximilian and Valentine, which we just detailed. Villefort entered his father's room, followed by Madame de Villefort. Both of the visitors, after saluting the old man and speaking to Barrois, a faithful servant, who had been 25 years in his service, took their places on each side of the paralytic old man. Noirtier was sitting in an armchair, which moved upon casters, in which he was placed in the morning, and from which he was carried at night, before a large glass, which reflected the whole apartment, and permitted him to see, without any attempt to move, which would have been impossible, all who entered the room and everything which was going on around him. Noirtier, although almost as immovable and helpless as a corpse, looked at the newcomers with a quick and intelligent expression, perceiving at once, by their ceremonious courtesy, that they were come on business of an unexpected and official character. Sight and hearing were the only senses remaining, and they appeared left, like who solitary sparks, to animate the body which seemed fit for nothing but the grave. It was only, however, by means of one of these senses that he could reveal the thoughts and feelings which still worked in his mind, and the look by which he gave expression to the inner life resembled one of those distant lights which are sometimes seen by the benighted traveler whilst crossing some desert, apprising him that there is still one human being who, like himself, is keeping watch amidst the silence and obscurity of night. Noirtier's hair was long and white, and flowed over his shoulders, whilst in his eyes, shaded by thick black lashes, was concentrated, as it often happens with any organ which is used to the exclusion of the others, all the activity, address, force, and intelligence which were formerly diffused over his whole body. Certainly, the movement of the arm, the sound of the voice, and the agility of the body were wanting, but the speaking eye sufficed for all. He commended with it. It was the medium through which his thanks were conveyed. In short, he was a corpse with living eyes, and nothing could be more startling than to observe the expression of anger or joy lighting up these marble-like features. 3 persons only could understand this language of the poor paralytic. These were Villefort, Valentine, and the old man's servant, of whom we have already spoken. But as Villefort saw his father but seldom, and then only when absolutely obliged, and he never took any pains to please or gratify him when he was there, all the old man's happiness was centered on his granddaughter. Valentine, by means of her love, her patience, her devotion, had learned to read in Noirtier's look all the varied feelings which were passing in his mind. To this dumb language, which was so unintelligibly to others, he answered by throwing her soul into the expression of the countenance, and in this manner were the conversations sustained between the blooming girl and form of clay, almost dust, who nevertheless possessed knowledge and penetration, united with a will as powerful as ever, although clogged by a body rendered utterly incapable of obeying its impulses. Valentine had resolved this strange problem, and was able easily to understand his thoughts, and to convey her own in return. And by her untiring and devoted assiduity, it was seldom that, in the ordinary transactions of everyday life, she failed to anticipate the wishes of the living mind or the wants of the almost inanimate body. As to the servant, he had, as we have said, been with his master for 25 years. Therefore he knew all his habits, and it was seldom that Noirtier found it necessary to ask for anything, so prompt was he in administering to all the necessities of the invalid. Villefort did not need the help of either Valentine or the domestic in order to carry on with his father the strange conversation which he was about to begin. As we have said, he perfectly understood the old man's vocabulary, and if he did not use it more often, it was only indifference and ennui which prevented him from so doing. He therefore allowed Valentine to go into the garden, sent away Barros, and after having taken a place on the right hand of his father, whilst Madame de Villefort seated herself on the left, he addressed him thus: "I trust you will not be displeased, sir, that Valentine has not come with us, or that I dismissed Barros, for our conference will be one which could not with propriety be carried on in the presence of either. Madame de Villefort and I have a communication to make to you." Noirtier's face remained perfectly passive during this long preamble, whilst, on the contrary, the eye of Villefort was endeavoring to penetrate into the inmost recesses of the old man's heart. "This communication," continued the Procureur du Roi, in that cold and decisive tone which seemed at once to preclude all discussion, "will, we're sure, meet with your approbation." The eye of the invalid still remained dull. He listened, nothing more. "Sir," resumed Villefort, "we're thinking of marrying Valentine." Had the old man's face been molded in wax, it could not have shown less emotion at this news. "The marriage will take place in less than 3 months," said Villefort. Noirtier's eye still remained its inanimate expression. Madame de Villefort now took her part in the conversation and added: "We thought this news could possess an interest for you, sir, who have always entertained a great affection for Valentine. It therefore only now remains for us to tell you the name of the young man for whom she is destined. It is one of the most desirable connection which could possibly be formed. He possesses fortune, a high rank in society, and every personal qualification likely to render Valentine supremely happy. His name, however, cannot be wholly unknown to you. The person to whom we allude is Monsieur Franz de Quesnel, Baron d'Épinay." During the time that his wife was speaking, Villefort had narrowly watched the countenance of the old man. When Madame de Villefort had pronounced the name of Franz, the pupil of Noirtier's eye began to dilate, and his eyelids trembled with the same movement as may be perceived on the lips of an individual about to speak, and darted a lightning glance. The Procureur du Roi, who knew the political hatred which had formerly existed between Noirtier and the elder d'Épinay, well understood the agitation and anger, but, feigning not to perceive either, he immediately resumed the conversation commenced by his wife. "Sir," said he, "you are aware that Valentine is about to enter his 19th year, which renders it important that she should lose no time in forming a suitable connection. Nevertheless, you have not been forgotten in our plans, and we have fully ascertained beforehand that Valentine's future husband will consent not to live in this house, for that might not be pleasant for the young people, but that you should live with them, so that you and Valentine, who are so attached to each other, would not be separated, and you would be able to pursue exactly the same course of life, and thus it will secure to you 2 children instead of 1, to watch over you." Noirtier's look was furious. It was very evident that something desperate was passing in the old man's mind, for the cry of anger and the grief rose to his throat, and not being able to find vent in utterance, appeared almost to choke him, for his face and lips turned purple. Villefort quietly opened a window, saying: "It's very warm, and the heat affects Monsieur Noirtier." He then returned to his place, but did not sit down. "This marriage," added Madame de Villefort, "is quite agreeable to the wishes of Monsieur d'Épinay and his family. Besides, he has no relations nearer than an uncle and an aunt, his mother having died at his birth, and his father having been assassinated in 1815, that is to say, when he was about 2 years old. He can, therefore, follow his own will." "That assassination was a mysterious affair," said Villefort, "and the perpetrators have hitherto escaped detection. Although suspicion had fallen on the head of more than one person, Noirtier made such an effort that his lips expanded into a smile. Now, continued Villefort, those to whom the guilt really belongs, by whom the crime was committed, on whose heads the justice of men may probably descend here, and the certain judgment of God hereafter, would rejoice in the opportunity thus afforded by bestowing such a peace offering as Valentine on the son of the General d'Épinay. Noirtier had succeeded in mastering his emotion more than could have been deemed possible with such a shattered frame. "Yes, I understand," was the reply contained in his look, and this look expressed a feeling of strong indignation, mixed with profound contempt. Villefort fully understood his father's meaning, and answered by a slight shrug of his shoulders. He then motioned for his wife to take leave. "Now, sir," said Madame de Villefort, "I must bid you farewell. Would you like me to send Edward to you for a short time?" It had been agreed that the old man should express his approbation by closing his eyes, his refusal by winking them several times, and if he had some desire or feeling to express, he raised them to heaven. If he wanted Valentine, he closed his right eye only, and if Barrows, the left. At Madame de Villefort's proposition, he instantly winked his eyes. Provoked by a complete refusal, she bit her lips and said, "Then I shall send Valentine to you." The old man closed his eyes eagerly, thereby intimating that such was his wish. Madame and Monsieur de Villefort bowed and left the room, giving orders that Valentine should be summoned. She had already been advised that she should have to visit him during the day, and, with a color still heightened by emotion, she entered the room just after her parents had quitted it. One look was sufficient to tell her that her grandfather was suffering, and that there was much on his mind which he still was wishing to communicate to her. "Dear grandpa," cried she, "what has happened? They have vexed you, and you are angry?" The paralytic closed his eyes in token of assent. "With whom? My father? No. Madame de Villefort? No. With me? Me?" The former sign was repeated. "Are you displeased with me?" cried Valentine in astonishment. Noirtier again closed his eyes. "And what have I done, dear grandpa, that you should be angry with me?" cried Valentine. There was no answer, and she continued, "I have not seen you all day. Has anyone been speaking to you against me?" "Yes," said the old man's look, with eagerness. "Let me think a moment. I do assure you, grandpa. Ah, Monsieur and Madame de Villefort have just left this room, have they not?" "Yes." "And it was they who told you something which made you angry. What was it then? May I go and ask them, that I may have the opportunity of making my peace with you?" "No, no," said Noirtier's look. "Ah, you frighten me. What can they have said?" And she again tried to think what it could be. "Ah, I know," said she, lowering her voice, and going close to the old man. "They have been speaking of a marriage, have they not?" "Yes," replied the angry look. "I understand. You're displeased at my silence. The reason was, they begged me not to tell you anything of it. They did not even acquaint me with their intentions, and I only discovered them by chance. That is why I have been so reserved with you, dear grandpapa. Pray forgive me." But there was no look of calculated to reassure her. All it seemed to say was, "It is not only your reserve that afflicts me." "What is it, then?" asked the young girl. "Perhaps you think I shall abandon you, dear grandpapa, and that I shall forget you when I am married. No. They told you, then, that Monsieur d'Épinay consented to our living together?" "Yes." "Then why are you still vexed and grieved?" The old man's eyes beamed with an expression of gentle affection. "Yes, I understand," said Valentine. "It is because you love me," the old man assented. "And you are afraid I shall be unhappy?" "Yes." "You don't like Monsieur France?" The eyes repeated several times. "No, no, no." "Then you are vexed with the engagement?" "Yes." "Well, listen," said Valentine, throwing herself on her knees and putting her arm round her grandfather's neck. "I'm vexed too, for I do not love Monsieur France d'Épinay. An expression of intense joy illumined the old man's eyes. When I wished to retire into a convent, you remember how angry you were with me. A tear trembled in the eyes of the invalid. Well, continued Valentine, the reason for my proposing it was that I might escape this hateful marriage, which drives me to despair. Noirtier's breathing became thick and short. Then the idea of this marriage really grieves you so too. Ah, if you could but help me! If we could both together defeat their plan, but you are unable to oppose them. You, whose mind is so quick and whose will is so firm, are nevertheless as weak and unequal to the contest as I am myself. Alas, you who would have been such a powerful protector to me in the days of your health and strength, can now only sympathize in my joys and sorrows, without being able to take any active part in them. However, this is much, and cause for gratitude, and heaven has not taken away all my blessings when it leaves me your sympathy and kindness. At these words there appeared in Noirtier's eyes an expression of such deep meaning that the young girl thought she could read these words here. You are mistaken. I can still do much for you. Do you think you can help me, dear grandpapa? Said Valentine. Yes. Noirtier raised his eyes. It was a sign agreed between him and Valentine when he wanted anything. What is it you want, dear grandpapa? Said Valentine, and she endeavored to recall to mind all the things he would be likely to need, and as the ideas presented themselves to her mind, she repeated them aloud, but finding that all her efforts elicited nothing but a constant no. Come, said she, since this plan does not answer, I will have recourse to another. She then recited all the letters of the alphabet from A down to N. When she arrived at the letter, he made a sign, yes. Ah, said Valentine, the thing you desire begins with the letter N. It is with N that we have to do then. Now let me see. What can you want which begins with N? Na, ne, ni, no. Yes, said the old man's eyes. Ah, it is no, then. Yes. Valentine fetched a dictionary, which she placed on a desk before Noirtier. She opened it, and seeing that the old man's eyes were thoroughly fixed on its pages, she ran her finger quickly up and down the columns. During the 6 years which had passed since Noirtier first fell into this sad state, Valentine's powers of invention had been too often put to the test not to render her expert in devising expedient for gaining a knowledge of his wishes, and the constant practice had so perfected her in the art that she guessed the old man's meanings as quickly as if he himself had been able to seek for what he wanted. At the word notary, Noirtier made a sign for her to stop. Notary, said she. Do you want a notary, dear grandpapa? The old man again signified that it was a notary he desired. You would wish a notary to be sent for, then, said Valentine. Yes. Shall my father be informed of your wish? Yes. Do you wish the notary be sent for immediately? Yes. Then they shall go for him directly. Dear grandpapa, is that all you want? Yes. Valentine rang the bell, and ordered the servant to tell Monsieur or Madame de Villefort that they were requested to come to Monsieur Noirtier's room. Are you satisfied now? Inquired Valentine. Yes. I am sure you are. It is not very difficult to discover that. And the young girl smiled on her grandfather as if he had been a child. Villefort entered, followed by Barrows. What do you want with me for, sir? Demanded he of the paralytic. Sir, said Valentine, my grandfather wishes for a notary. At this strange and unexpected demand, Villefort and his father exchanged looks. Yes, motioned the latter, with a firmness which seemed to declare that with the help of Valentine and his old servant, who both knew what his wishes were, he was quite prepared to maintain the contest. Do you wish for a notary? Asked Villefort. Yes. What to do? Noirtier made no answer. What do you want with a notary? again repeated Villefort. The invalid's eye remained fixed, by which expression he intended to intimate that his resolution was unalterable. Is it to do us some ill turn? Do you think it is worth while? Said Villefort. Still, said Barrows, with the freedom and fidelity of the old servant, if Monsieur Noirtier asks for a notary, I suppose he really wishes for a notary. Therefore I shall go at once and fetch one. Barrows acknowledged no master but Noirtier, and never allowed his desires in any way to be contradicted. Yes, I do want a notary, mentioned the old man, shutting his eyes with a look of defiance, which seemed to say, and I should like to see the person who dares to refuse my request. You shall have a notary, as you absolutely wish for one, sir, said Villefort, but I shall make excuses for you, for the scene cannot fail of being a most ridiculous one. Never mind that, said Barrows. I shall go and fetch a notary, nevertheless. And the old servant departed triumphantly on his mission.